let's pull the curtain and let's show people what it's like to create a yummy entrepreneurial life as a family. Yeah? Would you like that? Okay, great.
But I think this all started back, well, probably last summer, and we'll talk a bit about the transition and how I kind of came on board, but it was shortly after that where we were in Miami for your mindset retreat. And for those of you that were there saw that there was this very impromptu segment where Fabienne asked me to come up on stage and talk a little bit about what she does and what we do together now that we were working together. And that's really what triggered it. And there was a lot of interest from people that were there at that event. I mean, I remember there was the mic stands and people were in the back just lining up with questions about what it was like, how did you do it, you know, what are your secrets, what are your examples.
And especially, we understand this new mindset. You're asking us to play really big and to trust and to take great leaps in our business. And Fabienne, you've just given us the mindset, but when I go home, my spouse and I are probably going to fight because I'm going to want to invest in my business, and my spouse is looking at the layoffs and looking at the bank account and still thinking small. And how did you get Derek to believe in you so much? And so I think it's really important to talk about the actual working with your spouse thing, but the questions that we kept getting, and do you remember, like, lots of tears up at the microphones because people wanted so badly to be supported, so badly to have somebody say, I believe in you, I champion you, go for it. And we weren't seeing that.
Yeah.
And so that was a majority of the questions. And we thought, gosh, if we could do an entire, it felt like we could do an entire day or 2 days or 3 days of just answering questions from
I remember
people.
because I was on stage and I kept on, like some of you that were here, I had the mic and I was like getting ready to go, and she was like, no, stay, let's
more questions,
let's go with this,
more
because
questions.
it was just, there was such an interest. So, and then what we've seen is now that we've been kind of going along with this, we're not quite sure, you know, what it's all going to mean, but I mean, we have some ideas, and now it's really groundbreaking because no one else is really talking about this. I mean, you may have people who have done it in the sense that a husband and wife and working together in like a storefront or maybe a business partner, whatever it may be, but I think there's so much behind the scenes, and especially in this, you know, as Barry referred to, when you're an entrepreneur and you're kind of a renegade and you're on your own, and then you've got your significant other or partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it may be, even your family, your friends. There's a lot that I think resonates with what you and I have experienced and what we've shared, and people are feeling that as well. So it's just a lot of just kind of opening it up and, you know, having it be unplugged.
Yeah, because one of the things that we know is without support, it makes it a lot harder. And if we don't have the support of the one we love the most, then we begin to doubt ourselves. We begin to think, did I really make a mistake? I mean, I already took the great leap of faith and opened up my business. But now to have my partner not necessarily believe in me wholeheartedly, well, that might get you to question whether this is something that's actually viable. And what we're here for you today is to answer those questions, take you through the ups and downs that we had. It wasn't easy breezy, but we've made it work. And we're gonna tell you about the low lows and the yummiest yummies, right? And answer your questions along the way and stuff like that. But it's about a lot of things, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just about working together. I know that that's not what some people want, and you may not be wired that way, or it's not something that you're envisioning for yourself. But it's all about starting with an understanding, building that support mechanism, getting them on board, having your spouse on board to an extent, whether you want to work together or not. It's really, really important because that support mechanism is key and that understanding. So it's kind of a journey that we've gone through, and that's what we're going to share.
We're going to talk a lot about communication, because this is a big deal, especially if we're talking about your spouse and not just a partner or something like that. If you are married and especially if you have children together, it becomes absolutely crucial that you can figure it out, because otherwise it drastically affects the marriage. And let's not talk about what that could do to children's lives. But if it ever got to the place that we had to stop working together, we would, because our marriage and the family that we're creating for our children is top priority. And I think it's a commitment that needs to be made first and foremost before making that big decision, right? And I'm kind of jumping the gun, but I think it was important to share right away what the foundation can look like even before you get started with this conversation. Right? So it's going to be a lot about communication, getting them on board to support you.
When I was on that train for about a year going back and forth, I remember sitting there and looking. I mean, if you ride a commuter rail in the morning, you know that most people there are just like stone-faced. You know, if your phone goes off, you get a look like you better get the hell off the train as soon as you can if you're talking. And I was just sitting there and I was surrounded by suits. Everybody was reading the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. And it was just, these guys looked like they've been doing it for decades. And, you know, that was 5 years ago. So I was, you know, obviously not as old as they were, but I was looking at them and I'm like, I knew I did not want to be that person in 25 years. I did not want to still, from where I was at that point, still be riding the train, still be reading the same Wall Street Journal, the same New York Times, day in and day out, 5 days a week. So I didn't know what that was, or you know what that kind of epiphany meant, or what was in store for me, but that was at least kind of the inkling that said, okay, I don't want to be doing this forever.
And my inkling was, how can I set up my business so that he doesn't end up being that kind of guy? Nothing's wrong with that kind of guy. It's just not.
And I felt like I would continue it because it was making good money. I was on a good track. I had good experience, and we were making, you know, in terms of the income, was supporting the lifestyle that we had wanted. So I figured, well, that's kind of what you do. You know, I'd gone to college, I got a job, I was on the ladder, and I was doing the kind of corporate track through New York and Wall Street and everything else. So I just figured, well, that's just the path I'm going to go on. Little bit, you know, year in, year out. And then what started to happen is I saw you kind of like, I mean, not just financially speaking, but fulfillment-wise. And I was just, I mean, the numbers were like this, but in terms of like, you know, my purpose, which I didn't even know at that point or anything about it.
He didn't even know what purpose meant then. He didn't know that word.
I just wasn't feeling, I felt a feeling of lack of what I was doing was just not meant for me.
And the more I got meaning, the more the gap seemed to get bigger and bigger, right? And it was like we didn't talk about your work.
Yeah, no, and I think also the gap in the understanding of what you were doing and then what I was doing and how we could relate to it was just very difficult because I came home, I didn't want to talk about work. And then I didn't necessarily feel engaged in what you were doing, so we wouldn't talk about that. So it was just kind of like, not growing apart, but it just wasn't.
We weren't growing apart as a couple, but we weren't, work was not being discussed. And because I didn't feel like you were interested, and that hurt me.
Yeah.
And you just were disinterested in your own work, and it was like, okay, I'm home, I don't want to talk about fixed income technology. And frankly, I didn't want to talk about it either.
I think you knew what it is. You probably still don't know what it is.
Who cares?
That's true.